Hello, hey Boomer listeners. It is so good to be with you all again. I want to talk about change and transition and how uncomfortable that can be. I was certified in change leadership at Georgetown University back in 2001. And during that training, we talked a lot about management techniques and leadership techniques for managing change in organizations. But there was never any discussion about managing the change that people go through as they're moving from a full-time career to what we loosely refer to as retirement now. When I got certified as a life coach back in 2013, I did a lot of research on this because transition was the area that I was focusing on. And I found that there are different stages that people go through in this transition. And some of the things that in my work I found that help people is first of all, to take some time to explore some of the things that we used to love doing that we kind of left behind because we had to focus on our work. Other things that seem to help as people go through a change or a transition is maintaining those social connections, because we lose some of those social connections when we move from full-time work to whatever is next. And giving yourself some grace, because going through a transition can be very uncomfortable. There are basically 3 stages that we go through. The first stage is the ending, the loss of friends, the loss of our definition of who we are, the loss of what gave us meaning and purpose for getting up every day. And a lot of times as we're going through that stage of loss, we're feeling very disconnected, very unmoored, it really is the most uncomfortable stage. The next stage is where we spend time exploring, trying new things, seeing what fits, seeing what doesn't fit, deciding what we want to keep, what we want to let go of, and what we might want to add to our lives as we move into this next stage of life. And then there is the stage that we get to where we now have gotten comfortable. We've gotten our routine. We've gotten comfortable with what it is that we're adding, what we're letting go of, and we've designed that new stage of life. Our guest today, Dick Haiduck, spent some time interviewing over 75 people as they were transitioning through that life stage from full-time career to whatever is next. And he explored lots of different ways that people were approaching this. And then he wrote a book called Shifting Gears, where he put together 50 of the stories from these people that he interviewed. And so we'll talk to Dick about what he learned through his exploration with these people and how he is approaching retirement right now. I wanted to remind you, hey everybody, I wanted to remind you that in 2 days, the Boomers Thriving Summit is going live. It's June 30th from 4 to 5:30. Registration is still open. And for today and tomorrow, I have created a special discount code. It is called Last Minute. And you can enter Last Minute, capital L, capital M, into boomersthriving.eventbrite.com and get $30 off of the cost of your registration just for today and tomorrow. So if you've been hesitating, thinking about signing up, now is the time. And let your friends know too. We have some amazing speakers. We have a great program with lots of bonus materials. So I hope to see all of you there. It is being recorded. If for some reason you are not able to attend live, you can always watch the recording. You will have the link for that. And 10% of your registration fee goes to Meals on Wheels, and 10% of your registration fee goes to the Walk to End Alzheimer's. Hey Boomer is all about giving back, and making a difference. And that's what we'll be doing with this Boomers Thriving Summit. You know I love your questions and your comments, and I want to see you question Dick, tell him how much you're enjoying our conversation, and participate in this conversation. So let me bring him on and introduce you to him. Hi, Dick.
Hi, Wendy. How are you?
I'm terrific. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be on your show, but I'm especially happy. Remember our first conversation? We were in the midst of moving. The only thing in the room was my internet connection and me sitting on the floor and you patiently interviewing me. And I will always remember that was the first time we met.
I know. That was a pretty funny first meeting. I'm glad you are now settled in your house.
We're pretty settled. My wife has done a spectacular job of it.
Good.
And I've helped some too, but I do the unskilled work.
Well, let me introduce you to the people listening today, Dick. So Richard, as you see, Richard Dick Haiduck had a career in life sciences as an executive and a mentor. And he is now spending time as an active retiree. His days are filled with mentoring social entrepreneurs, regular biking, hiking, reading, family time, and as he mentioned, his recent relocation. He is now in Pacific Grove, California. Dick has found the shift to being an author a natural shift, and we'll learn why. Curiosity, learning new things, and listening carefully are transferable skills. His first book, Shifting Gears, 50 Baby Boomers Share Their Meaningful Journey in Retirement, is based on interviews with people over the age of 65 as they transition into a new lifestyle, facing new opportunities to reinvent themselves. Dick graduated from Miami University, got an MBA from Xavier University. He is happily married to his wife of 52 years and has 2 daughters and 4 grandsons. Sounds like a good life.
It is a very good life.
So I always like to start by letting our audience get to know you a little bit. So can you briefly give us your story and how you got to where you are today?
Well, sure. And it fits nicely into the intro that you gave of kind of the stages that you go through your life. I was in the life sciences business all of my working career. Okay, there we go. And was CEO of a couple of startup biotech companies. And then the last 12 years, I was a consultant to startup biotech CEOs. And the premise there was, if I can keep you from making all the mistakes that I made, then this will be a helpful relationship. And I did that for about 12 years. And I had this plan of retiring and doing it gradually. And I was kind of learning by doing what would be the transition that would work best for me. And I decided what I would do is gradually stop working and gradually start retiring. So each year I would do one less biotech client and I would add one new retirement activity or expand one new activity that I was involved in. So it took me about 5 years to retire. But during that time, I never had that sense of loss. I never lost purpose. I never lost things to do. I always had something to do when I got up in the morning, sometimes work, sometimes retirement. And as I interviewed others for the book, I found that those who were able to do it gradually had a better experience. That 1 year of loss disappeared if they were able to kind of put their toe in the water and gradually get used to it. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an author. At age 7, I had a little writing pad, and each day I would write another story. They were all fiction. They were mostly sci-fi and fantasy and, just weird stuff, and never longer than a page. So I, not fully developed stories, but just stories. So that was fun. I got a lot of encouragement from teachers and family and friends. But after about a year of that, I said, I think I'd rather go out and ride my bike, or I'd rather go out and goof around.
Right.
So I left the writing field for 65 years and then came back to it at age 72 and said, now maybe I'll try that again.
Well, that's a pretty big a span of time there. Did you do, I mean, you did writing for work, right?
I did writing for work, but I wrote nothing that was other than work.
All right. So go ahead.
I'd write letters and, the things that are normal activities of daily living, but nothing that was intended to be printed.
So how did you get the idea initially that you were going to write a book about retirement and talk to people about it?
It kind of crept up on me. I was talking with a guy that I had known for years, and I don't even know how we got on the subject, but he said, Dick, did I ever tell you I was in the Senior Olympics?
Oh.
And I said, Dave, I've known you for years. You never mentioned that. And he says, well, I was kind of humble about it. I didn't want to feel like I was bragging. Anyway, so I probed the story. He went into it in some depth. And I said, Dave, that's a fascinating story. Other people would enjoy hearing that. And then I thought kind of nothing more of it. But over the next few weeks, that happened 2 more times.
Huh.
My antenna were up a little bit. I was kind of saying to people, tell me about something you're doing in this stage of your life. And I'd kind of draw them out. But I found people doing things that were interesting stories. And at one point, I made the conscious decision, these stories would be interesting and useful to people at this stage of life. And I've got the time to do it, and I've got the interest to do it. So go for it. Age 72 seems like a right time to start being an author, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we said this was your first book, Dick. Is there another book that you're thinking about?
The sequel would happen naturally because the stories were flowing like crazy to get the first 75. Once the word got out that I was looking, everybody was referring people to me and all that. But since the book has been published, there's been a whole flood of people saying, "Have I got a story for you?"
I bet.
So I've got plenty of stories. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. It's been fun, but I don't know if it'd be fun the second time. Part of the fun was just learning new things, and interacting with a lot of new people with different experiences and that sort of thing. So I don't know the answer to your question.
Okay. All right. So what was the process like of, starting? Well, you'd never written a book besides your little short stories. I mean, what was the process like to start putting together a book?
Well, it started with the interviews, which were just great fun. I started with people that I knew and then asked them for referrals. So most of the people in the book are people I had not met before. And having discussions in which they opened up, in which they were very candid about what they'd been through, was just a really meaningful experience for me. I just looked inside people's thinking and heard what motivated them, what challenged them, what they enjoyed, what was driving them crazy, and being open to them sometimes rambling on in a story and me just asking questions like, oh, really? Tell me more, instead of guiding it. And so they were very unguided interviews. And those are the most fun because people get more and more comfortable opening up and telling the depth of their story. But there's a downside to that. At the end of the interviews, I had 800 pages of transcripts.
Oh, my.
And I thought, I'm a first-time author, and there's a lot of good material here, but I think an 800-page book for a first-time author probably isn't going anywhere. And so then the next part, I'm rambling on here a little bit, but the next part of that process was to then edit down. And that was heartbreaking because these are people I had looked in the eye and they told me these fascinating stories. And I said, yeah, but that one's got to be cut, or that one's somewhat duplicative, or that one's just not as interesting as some of the others.
Yeah.
So the editing down was quite an experience.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. So you have a story in the prologue with a quote that says, "Lift up your head, the hard part is over." Will you share that story with our listeners?
Yeah, glad to. That to me encapsulates the whole process of retirement and the transition. This is a guy who's a pretty deep thinker, and he wanted to just kind of get his head on straight as he entered his next stage of retirement. So he went to walk the Camino de Santiago, which is that long trek through Spain and France. And it's it's a place of contemplation. It's a place where people walk and think. And this guy is both a walker and a thinker, so it was perfect for him. And so he's going along on the trail, and he and his buddy, and they come to a difficult hill, the most difficult hill on the 500-mile walk. And they struggle, and it's difficult. They get to the top, and at the top of the hill is an outhouse, and a funny shaped outhouse, kind of an oval shaped outhouse. And written in French across the door was, "Lift up your head, the hard part is over." And so Rick said, "You're right, the hard part is over. We just made it up that very difficult hill." And then he thought about it a little bit, and he turned to his buddy and said, "No, that's not just this hill. We're through the hardest part of the climb. So we can lift up our head. The hard part is over, not just this hill, but this part of the climb." And then they talked a little bit further. And then he said, "No, it's way bigger than that. My life is at that stage. Lift up your head. The hard part is over. I've got everything that I'm looking for. I can now enjoy it. The hard part is over." And so it kind of set a tone for the book that, people go through the loss, they go through the transition, they go through the change. But at the end of it, they can lift up their head. The hard part is over.
I think that's a great quote because, and the hard part is not just, I think, it's like all of life, all the ups and downs we went through getting out of college and raising our kids and paying our bills and, all those things. And hopefully now we have a little more calm and confidence and security to get us through this next phase.
And Wendy, I never imagined when I went to write a book that it would be built around a quote on the door of an outhouse.
I know. That is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But it's so true. It's so true. So what surprised you, Dick, about some of the different ways that you found these people going through retirement?
Well, there were a couple of surprises. I think the breadth of things that people do, the kinds of things that you don't really connect with retirement, you think, oh, that's too hard or that's too challenging or whatever. So I think people's ability to adventure onward, I've been really proud to be part of the boomer generation because I think we really did some cool stuff. Mm-hmm. And we made a lot of social changes. Women's rights came forward, gay rights came forward, Vietnam War was protested. We were active, and we weren't always right, but we were always doing stuff. Mm-hmm. And so the question I kind of had was, when you get a larger group of people, are they going to say, well, we did all that stuff as boomers earlier. It's time to relax, sit on a rocking chair and let life go by? Or would they say, wait a minute, I'm not stopping now. I'm going to keep doing things. And within the book, there are both. There are some people who have just kind of said, I'm going to relax. I've enjoyed it. I've earned it. There are other people who said, I'm going to do something that I've always wanted to do that's very different from what I had done in my working career.
Yeah. I saw that in the book, and it seemed to me that the people that seemed to be thriving the most, that seemed to be more engaged, were the ones that were still that never got to that point where they're saying, well, I'm 77, I'm too old, or I'm 89, I'm too old. They're still doing, they're still involved. Did you find that too?
Yeah, but the involvement was not always something magnificent and noteworthy.
Oh, right.
Two of my favorites. This one lady formed this group of people to play ukulele. They started in their 70s, and once a month they play ukulele, and it's joyful. And they sing and they play. They've learned 4 chords, and they think that's enough for their purposes. And they just have a ball. And that's not life-changing except for them. It's life-changing for them because it gives them once a month something to look forward to that's joyful. And another guy said, I've always wanted to go fishing. I want to fish every day in my retirement. And I said, you can't possibly fish every day in retirement. He says, well, I don't make it every day. But he says, probably 5 days a week. And he lives out in Montana, and he's got 4 great rivers near him. And so both of them have the freedom to do those sorts of things, in contrast to others who have some social purpose or some athletic purpose or some accomplishment-driven objective that is monumental and that is just really, really hard to achieve.
Yeah. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because if it's like even the guy fishing, he's probably learning new techniques, learning how to spot the fish, learning every day, even as he's relaxing and fishing.
Wendy, he tried to convince me, and actually got most of the way there, that fishing is an intellectual exercise. And I said, fishing, intellectual? That doesn't fit. And he said, no, you don't understand. He said, you're out there in the river and there's so much going on. How do you tie the fly? How is the water moving? What do you see as the fish coming to the surface? All of these different variables. And he said, and you concentrate, and at the end of the day, you feel like you've just really had an intellectual workout. And his story, he says, I was in the river, I was doing all this, I was concentrating like crazy. I didn't notice the bear coming to the shore next to where I was fishing. He says, I was that intense. He says, I didn't even notice. And then when I did, of course, I panicked. But for him, that's an intellectual experience.
And I've known people like that's what it's about. It's watching the water, watching the flies, and it's learning. I think that's a big thing where as long as we're always learning.
Yeah. So a contrast to that is a lady named Donna who had 4 surgeries in 3 years, 2 hip replacements, 2 knee replacements. And then she said, I can get myself in shape again. I've been on a cane for 3 years. I'm going to get myself in shape, and I'm going to do something really difficult. And she recruited her boyfriend to kind of think that through with her. And they decided to climb Mount Kilimanjaro together.
Yeah, that's pretty difficult.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that of the people who read my book, not many of them are going to climb Kilimanjaro, but they can all look at this lady and say, Donna put it all together. She started working out. She decided to climb a 19,000-foot mountain, a 6-day climb in Africa. I mean, you can't aim any higher than that.
I know.
And her story was inspiring to those of us who say, well, I kind of ought to do some exercise today. Well, wait, Donna climbed Kilimanjaro. I can at least go out for a bike ride or go for a run.
I read that story and I was like, oh my gosh, after all that surgery, just a walk in the woods and my back might hurt. But I was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
And as you expect, her girlfriends all said, Donna, you're crazy. You can't be doing this. And she said, you don't understand. I'm going to do this. This is the next thing I'm going to do in my life. And she and her boyfriend went off on that adventure. And
she didn't quite make it all the way to the top, though, right?
Oh, you gave away the ending. No, that's okay. That's okay. She didn't quite make it, but she made it at an emotional level. She set out to do something. She gave it her best shot, and she came close. She made it to the final ascent where she couldn't couldn't do that.
It was super inspiring story. Yeah, super inspiring. Well, share some other inspiring stories with us.
Well, I think there's some social purpose stories that are really inspiring. Bruce and Jill have been retired for a few years now, and they teach anger management at a maximum security prison. So these are the roughest, toughest criminals. Many of them are murderers, rapists, people who are in some for life in a maximum security prison. And their objective was to get people to deal with anger management with people who couldn't deal with anger management. They use Buddhist meditation principles to teach this. And I thought that was really a noble thing to do. It sounded difficult. But when they talked about their motivation, I was stunned by it. They said, not many people want to do a volunteer job where you get rejection 9 days out of 10. And sometimes that rejection is people saying, I'm not buying that. I'm not doing that. Get out of my life. You're just bothering me. And their response consistently and calmly is, I'll be back next week and we'll talk again.
Wow.
And they walk out of there and they say, you got to be ready for 9 out of 10 days being bad days. But we want to do that because within that, the 1 day in 10 that's good is great. And you're changing a life and you're changing someone who was in the very toughest of circumstances, and you're giving them a chance to come back. And their view was there were a lot of volunteer things they could do, but this was the one that they could do. They felt they had the temperament to do it. They had the skills in Buddhist meditation skills that they thought would be useful. And they both had this feeling that this was something that started to settle the score. They'd had a good life. They'd had a lot of nice things happen to them. A good family situation, good work situation. They retired comfortably, and they said, "This is our chance to kind of settle that score a little bit." And his wife is a tiny little thing. She's very short and very thin, very fit. And she goes in. They go in as a couple, but then once they're inside the jail, they may split up, and she goes one place and he goes another. And I said, aren't you terrified when you're in the jail by yourself? Are you accompanied by someone? She says, no, I just go in. She says, no, I'm not terrified. None of the volunteers in this maximum security prison have ever had a problem. She said, sometimes I feel a little funny and I look up and I see if there's a guard looking down on us.
Yeah.
And there's supposed to be, but there isn't always.
Wow.
And she said, but I've never been frightened. She says, because I feel like what I'm doing gives me a certain protection.
Yeah.
So that to me it was one of the most giving stories in the book. It was just the fact that most days were not good days. And most of us don't hang in there with that.
Yeah, I can hear how moved you were by that.
Yeah.
So just as an aside note to the listeners, if any of you want to share some of what your transitions have been like, what you're doing now, we'd love to see that. And as we're looking for that, Dick, I'm curious about some of the most challenging things that people have faced that you spoke with as they were going from full-time career to whatever is next.
Yeah, I think the career part is one set of challenges. And some of the people that I talked to, when I'd ask them to describe themselves, they would say, I used to be a doctor. I used to be an accountant. And I'd always kind of have to say, oh, what are you now?
Yeah.
And then they'd say, well, I used to be an accountant. And I think those are people that are in the middle of that transition. A lot of the people that I interviewed had made the transition to the point where they had found something that connected to their identity. and connected to their sense of purpose and connected to their motivations and their joy. And some of that was with, some volunteer activities or a new hobby or a new leisure time kind of thing. Others had different challenges that they faced that were not career related. There's two people in the book who had late life divorces. And one of those stories, again, this was inspiring to me. This guy was a gay guy. His partner of 18 years, they came to a point where it just wasn't working anymore, and they split up. And at about that same time, he began losing his vision. He had macular degeneration. So now he's lost his long relationship. He's losing his vision. He's losing his self-esteem and sense of self-worth. He's made the transition to being comfortable as a gay person, but once his partner and he split up, he was challenged by that as well. And he went through a process of kind of thinking through, where am I? I'm in my 70s. I've lost my partner and I'm losing my vision. What do I do now? And he discovered something. He discovered kind of a spiritual solution of something I'd never heard of. It was called Trillium. And Trillium is a way of looking at life where you say, I have 1 foot in immortality and 1 foot in mortality. And it allows you, when he described it, he said, it brought me back. It brought me back to being able to deal with this adversity and come out the other side. And when I was talking to him, it was a couple of years after this had all occurred. And he said, I am now happier than I've ever been at any time in my life.
Wow.
He's found new activities. He's found new partners. He's found a way to cope with his blindness. He took an international trip to Thailand on his own with nobody accompanying him. And he says, I knew I could do it if I just tried.
Yeah.
And so this guy went through just a really tough time and came out of it just remarkably.
Yeah, that does sound like that was not easy. But what I'm hearing as kind of a through line, the woman that climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and this guy's story of going through blindness and losing is this, I can do it. This belief that once I get through this, I'm going to be okay. I can do this.
Yeah, I think the word freedom comes up a lot. Sometimes people say it, sometimes I infer it. But this is a time when you have the freedom of choices. You can try things, and you can fail at things. Failing is never easier than in retirement because the stakes are so low. You say, well, I'll go do this. I'll go try to do bike riding. And if you don't like it, then you don't do it anymore. Or I'll go volunteer at this organization. And if you don't like it, then you quit. And the people who have had the greatest outcomes, the most favorable outcomes, are those that know how to stop doing stuff. We all can try things, but I had a social media dialogue with some lady who was saying, I volunteered and they treat me like crap and they don't respect me and they're really mean to me. And I said, there's 100 other volunteer opportunities where you will be liked, you will be respected, you will be joyful. Volunteering is supposed to be joyful, but she was having a hard time letting go because when we worked, quitting was not a good thing. You quit as a last choice. In retirement, it can be a first choice.
It can be a first choice.
One of the guys that I interviewed said, I want to do volunteering. And I said, oh, that's great. How'd you go about it? He said, I couldn't figure out how to describe what I wanted, but I knew that I would know it when I got into it. So in fairly short succession, he went through 4 different volunteering opportunities until he found the one that was just perfect for him, that capitalized on his skill as a mentor. And he says, mentoring is what I really do best and enjoy the most. And any volunteering that I'm doing that isn't mentoring, I kind of came to the conclusion it wasn't going to be interesting. So the one he got to was one where he could be an active mentor. But his point was, I get to quit. If I don't like it, too bad, I'm moving on. And he always did it respectfully and courteously, and he never left anybody in the lurch. But he also said, this is my time. I've earned the right to do this. I've earned the right to do it my way and to get what I came for, get what I'm seeking. And that may be joy, that may be sense of purpose, that may be some sort of athletic accomplishment, but it's what you choose to be. And the people who had the most admirable retirements in the book are those that recognized that freedom and didn't let anything stop them.
I think that's an important word, the freedom to make that choice. Yeah. So you divided the book into different sections, right? You have the ideal location, new kinds of work, leisure activity, giving back, inward experiences. How many of these have you personally gone through, and where do you think you are now?
Let's start with ideal location. One of my buddies, we made a decision to leave our home of 18 years and move to a place near the ocean in Pacific Grove. And one of my very close friends said to me, Dick, are you moving because you wrote this book? And I said, what are you talking about? And then I paused for a second. I said, you may be onto something. I saw so many people doing something they'd always wanted to do. Then I looked in the mirror one day and said, what about us? And I talked to my wife and we said, we always wanted to be near the ocean. Why not? And so we made this decision to move. And then subconsciously, I think it actually was influenced by a lot of the great stories in the book. So that decision of where to live, a lot of people get stuck in their inertia and they say, well, I'm here because I've always been here. Or there may be some overwhelming reason for staying where they are. Family and friends is obviously a big one. But you have the freedom to choose. So I think that ideal location, I went through new kinds of work, leisure activity. Now that we're at the ocean, we went kayaking the other day, and that's going to be one of our new things.
Oh, fun.
And there's a great set of wildlife in the water here. The sea otters are literally right next to your kayak, and the seals and sea lions and all that.
And they don't bother you?
Well, they didn't when we were there. No, they don't. No. They're great photo opportunities too.
Nice.
Giving back, I'd say I was kind of already into that as I was winding down my retirement, and working with social entrepreneurs is something that I've always enjoyed doing. So I've expanded that and continuing that. And inward experiences, I've never been a religious or a particularly spiritual guy, but I think the interviews kind of opened my eyes in a way that was surprising to me. There was a group of ladies called Owls, and this was 5 ladies who had been girlfriends for 50 years, had worked at a school together, had done a lot of family things together. And the Owls decided to address this stage of life together. What does end of life mean for us? And in some ways that was spiritual. In other ways that was different social patterns, different relationships with their spouses, different ways in which things were playing out. And each month they have a different topic. And one of them takes the lead and walks them through that subject, and they just talk about it. Mm-hmm. And because they've been friends for 50 years, nothing's off limits. They can talk candidly and deal with things. And all of them had the same view. They said, after every session we do, I come away feeling better about this stage of life. Even though there are some unpleasant things we talk about and some pleasant things, we laugh together, we cry together, we think together, and deal with end of life kinds of things, including dying, but not predominantly dying.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So that opened my eyes to say, you know what, maybe I am not going to live forever. And that kind of came as a jolt to me.
yeah, maybe not, but interesting that at this stage, it kind of allowed you to open yourself up to being a little more, call it spiritual or introspective or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what, I've noticed that as we get older, that we do start to explore life in different ways. Things aren't as black and white or aren't as, big, gigantic problems. That everything seems to take on a different perspective in my experience as we've aged.
Yeah. One of the things that one of the interviews taught me is a concept that I've actually made up some words about, and I call it relaxed intensity.
I like that.
And you can't have those two words next to each other. They're the opposite of each other. But this guy had been involved with building a cancer house for their community. He'd been diagnosed with cancer and then wanted to give back. And they said, how would you like to help us build this cancer house, which is a place where patients can stay between treatments or their family can stay while they're being treated. So he organized this group of volunteers, and this guy had a successful business career and knew how to manage things and all that. But he said, this time was different. I could do it in a relaxed way. I could laugh about things. We could have some fun along the way. We had more camaraderie and less bureaucracy and less kind of the boss is breathing down my neck kind of stuff. So he led this effort. But he said he was more relaxed in that project, even though the project was incredibly important, both to the community and to him. He said that intensity he embraced, but the relaxation part of it was something he could only do on a project like this while he was retired, because his mind shifted to these strange words of relaxed intensity.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I like that. So I wanted to give people the opportunity to get in touch with you to find out about the book and if they have any questions about it. So let me share your website, which is richardhaiduck.com. And if you want to email Dick, you can email him at dhaiduck@gmail.com. And Dick, I always like to ask our guests, because Hey Boomer is about inspiring and motivating people over 55 to continue to be engaged in life and to find their passion or their cause. So what are one or two takeaways that you have learned through this process that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I think that if you embrace that idea of freedom that we've talked about, it opens all the doors, and doing something that you've always wanted to do, but never had the time or the energy or whatever. I think that's an important part. I think the other part is trial and error is okay. I think that it's not only okay, it's the way to do this for a lot of the people. Some people know immediately what they want to do, and they don't have to do trial and error. That's great. But for others, they have to explore. They have to be willing to fail, that sort of thing. One other thing we didn't talk about, and it's quite a transition for several of the people in the book, and that's this idea of multitasking. Mm-hmm. When you're working, you get up in the morning and you go to work, and that's what you do 5 or more days a week. Retirement isn't like that. You get up and one morning you might go kayaking, and the next day you might be volunteering, and the next day you might be climbing a mountain or whatever. But the routine, one of the ladies that I interviewed up in Portland had this incredible range of 3 major activities. And she said, but it doesn't feel right. And I said, no, it sounds like an ideal retirement. You got these 3 great things. You love all 3 of them. She says, yeah, but which one is the lead one? And I said, why does one have to be a lead? You can multitask. You can do 3 things that you enjoy and that you feel good about. And she says, well, it doesn't feel like that yet. And I said, well, give it some time and see if it starts to feel better.
That's right.
And she knew why it was the case. She said, when I went to work, it was every morning, and that became who I was, what I was doing, what my purpose was. Now I've got these 3, and they're very different things.
Yeah,
so
but you're right. That was good advice to tell her to give it some time. Angie just said she ordered a copy of your book for a friend who's doing the slow retirement thing. She thinks that your stories will inspire her.
Okay.
I think so too, Angie. So thanks for all that you shared with us today, Dick, and for the book and the joy and the great stories. I also want to thank our 2 co-sponsors for the Boomers Thriving Summit, the Meals on Wheels and the Walk to End Alzheimer's, each of which will get 10% of the full registrations that come in. And if you do want to register for the summit, like I said, I have this special going on now for today and tomorrow. You enter the code last minute. Oh, sorry, not the little quote at the end, just last minute with a capital L and capital M into boomersthriving.eventbrite.com, and you can register for the summit there. And tell your friends about the show. Tell your friends to watch us, listen to us on podcast. Remember that I'm taking July off. So we are going to come back bigger and stronger in August. Lots of new guests, new ideas. I'm excited about what's coming next. And what else did I want to tell you? I think that's all. I always like to end my show with a quote from C.S. Lewis, where he says, "You are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream." So I thank you all for joining us today. I know everybody is so busy, and I am so grateful that you chose to join us on Hey Boomer today. Thanks again, Dick.
Wendy, thank you for both the interview today, but also all you're doing for Boomers. I think that's very, very inspiring for myself and many others. And you do it so well. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer. See you in August.